7 reasons expats are leaving Thailand for Vietnam and the Philippines. This is what Marcus Webb from Charlotte, North Carolina has been Googling at 11 p.m. for the past 3 months. Not because he read it somewhere, because he lived it. He lost $93,000 over 4 years. Not to crime, not to obvious stupidity, not to anything he couldn't have justified at every single step. His story is the one that keeps me up at night, because it isn't a cautionary tale about a fool. It's a cautionary tale about a careful man who trusted the wrong map. Before we continue, please subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any videos in the future. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 58 years old, and I'm sitting in a rented studio apartment in Da Nang, Vietnam, looking out at the South China Sea, trying to figure out how to explain 4 years of my life to someone who hasn't made the same mistakes yet. I'm not bitter. I want to be clear about that from the start. But I am honest, finally, in a way I wasn't for most of those 4 years. And honesty has a cost too. It's just cheaper than the alternative. I was 54 when I left Charlotte, North Carolina, regional sales director for a mid-sized logistics company for 19 years. I was good at my job in the way that a machine is good at its function, efficiently, reliably, and without much feeling left over. My 2 kids, Amber and Daniel, were grown and building their own lives in other cities. My ex-wife, Karen, had remarried someone pleasant and suburban and entirely unlike me. I wasn't unhappy exactly. I was just done. Done with the commute, done with the quarterly reviews, done with the particular flavor of meaninglessness that comes from selling something you don't care about to people who don't really need it. I was 54 years old, and I had been performing competence for so long that I'd forgotten there was a person underneath the performance. The YouTube rabbit hole started on a Tuesday night in November 2020, which is somehow the most embarrassing detail. I was looking up pension calculation tools, and the algorithm served me a video called something like How I Live Like a King in Thailand on $1,500 a month. I clicked it as a joke. I watched 11 more before I went to bed. By the end of the week, I had a spreadsheet. By the end of the month, I had a timeline. I'm a logistics man by trade. I have built supply chains across 4 time zones and managed teams of 40 people. And once I begin planning something, I do it with a thoroughness that is, in retrospect, both my greatest strength and one of the things that got me into trouble. Because thoroughness is not the same as wisdom. Thoroughness means you do the research well. Wisdom means you know which research to do. I want to be honest about something that most people in my position tend to gloss over. I researched Thailand for almost a full year before I committed. I didn't just watch YouTube. I read forums, Thai Visa, Expat Exchange, half a dozen Reddit communities. I downloaded the official Thai retirement visa documentation from 3 different government sources and cross-referenced them. I subscribed to 2 newsletters written by long-term Thailand expats. I built a cost of living model that drew on actual forum posts asking what people were spending, not just the optimistic headline numbers from the videos. I also looked seriously at Vietnam and the Philippines. Da Nang had a video tour that genuinely impressed me. Sleek, modern, that long dragon bridge lit up at night, the beach right there. Cebu had the English language advantage that mattered to me at 54 in a way it might not have at 34. But Thailand kept winning every comparison I ran. The food scene in Chiang Mai was extraordinary, miles ahead of anything I'd seen in the Vietnam videos. The hospitals looked like private American clinics, actual photos of actual wards, not stock images. The expat infrastructure was mature in a way neither Vietnam nor Philippines yet matched. Not just Facebook groups, but actual organized communities of men who'd been doing this for a decade, who had navigated the visa system and the banking and the housing and had the kind of institutional knowledge that only accumulates with time. When you're stepping off a cliff, you look for evidence that other people have survived the landing. I did the math 17 different ways. My pension was $2,200 a month. A good one, the kind you can still get if you spent 2 decades building it carefully in corporate logistics. I had $180,000 in savings I'd managed not to touch during the divorce. The plan was clean, and I was proud of how clean it was. Live comfortably on $1,800 a month, let the $180,000 compound untouched across a decade, and never feel financially panicked again. In Charlotte in 2021, $1,800 a month was bare subsistence. In Chiang Mai, based on everything I had read, it was abundance, massages and good food and a pool in the complex and money left over at the end of every month. I told myself I wasn't running away. I was running toward something. I said that sentence out loud enough times that I started to believe it wasn't defensive. What I didn't understand yet, what no amount of YouTube research can actually teach you, is that watching someone else's retirement is not the same as stress testing your own. The videos show you the highlights. They show you the $3 pad thai and the $8 massage and the smiling locals and the sunsets and the beautiful expatriate sitting on his balcony looking satisfied with his choices. And they don't show you who you become when the novelty wears off and the structure of your old life is gone and you are left with just yourself in a foreign country with too much time and no instinctive sense of what you are supposed to be doing with it. That version of the information wasn't available in any video I watched. I had to earn it the expensive way. I booked a 3-week scouting trip for February 2021, 3 cities in Thailand, Chiang Mai, Bangkok, Hua Hin, 1 stop in Da Nang, a quick look at Cebu. I told myself it was due diligence. I was still running the comparison. I was still being rational. I landed in Chiang Mai first, and I don't think I was rational for a single moment after that. The air was warm and smelled of something I couldn't name, lemongrass and diesel and something sweet underneath that might have been frangipani. I checked into a guest house in the Niman area and walked out the door, and within 20 minutes I had eaten the best meal of my life at a plastic table in an alley and paid the equivalent of $2.40 for it. That's not a metaphor. That actually happened, and it rewired something in me immediately and comprehensively. I remember thinking, Charlotte will not be able to compete with this. I should have noticed that I'd framed it as a competition that Charlotte was losing rather than as a trip I was still conducting with an open mind. The expat meetup was the thing that sealed it completely. Someone in an online forum had posted an address, a cafe off the Moat Road that held informal gatherings on Thursday evenings, and I showed up and found about 30 men, ranging in age from 40 to their mid-70s, all doing exactly what I was imagining doing. Some of them had been there 5 years, some had been there 12. They were relaxed in a way that men in American offices are never relaxed, not the forced relaxation of vacation, but the genuine ease of people who have worked out the arrangement of their days and are not anxious about it. A 61-year-old Brit named Harold had been in Chiang Mai for 9 years. He'd owned a small import business, sold it, and was living comfortably on the proceeds and a UK pension. He leaned across the table at me with the casual authority of a man who has thought harder about something than you have and said, "Thailand changed my life. Just don't let Thailand change you." I thought that was a charming and slightly cryptic thing to say, and I filed it under colorful local wisdom and ordered another Chang beer and didn't think about it again for 2 years. I went to Da Nang. It was genuinely impressive in ways I registered and then immediately discounted. The seafront was modern and clean. The condo buildings visible from the beach were new construction, not the tired 5-story walk-ups I'd half expected from Vietnam. The food was excellent, but I cataloged Da Nang as too new, too chaotic. The streets felt unfinished in places. The expat scene was smaller and scrappier, without the settled institutional weight of Chiang Mai's, and the cafe culture that I'd built into my fantasy of retirement mornings wasn't there yet. I wasn't wrong about any of those observations exactly. I was wrong about whether they mattered more than the underlying financial logic. And I went to Cebu briefly, landed and looked at the airport and took a cab to the city and spent 2 days walking around feeling vaguely disconnected and decided it was too far from everything without being able to articulate what everything was. I flew home from Bangkok having already, emotionally, moved to Thailand. The actual logistics, giving notice on my apartment, selling furniture, filing retirement paperwork, those were just administration for a decision that had been made somewhere over the Pacific on the way back. What no one tells you about the first 6 months is the rainy season. I landed in Chiang Mai in June, which was, I later learned, approximately the worst possible time to arrive if you want your initial impression to hold. It rained every afternoon with a totality that made Charlotte thunderstorms seem polite and tentative. Gray afternoons, wet streets, the particular indoor quality of days when you can't open your balcony door without the floor getting soaked. My first mood dip happened in week 2, and I dismissed it as adjustment. Everything was still objectively good. I had found a condo near Niman for $480 a month, genuinely modern and clean, with a small gym and a rooftop pool. My food costs were running about $350 a month, and I was eating better than I had in years. The math was exactly as projected. I felt smug about the math. I discovered the expat bar circuit around week 3. There's a particular strip near the Old City Moat where you can sit on a plastic stool outside and drink cold beer for the equivalent of $1.50 a glass and talk to other Western men about nothing in particular for hours at a stretch. I started going twice a week, which felt social, then 4 times, which also felt social. I told myself it was how I was building community, which was true as far as it went. What was also true, and which I did not examine, was that I was drinking more than I had in 15 years of Charlotte life, and that the primary purpose of those evenings was not community, but the management of an emptiness I hadn't expected and didn't know how to address directly. Fawn worked at the small restaurant on my block, the one I went to 3 or 4 mornings a week for coffee and eggs and the mild comfort of a familiar face. She was 34 years old, cheerful in the unhurried Thai way that is genuine and not performance, and she spoke enough English to have actual conversations rather than just transactions. Nothing happened for 2 months. She was just the woman at the restaurant, friendly and professional. Then, one afternoon, she brought me an extra piece of fruit I hadn't ordered, and we ended up talking for an hour after the breakfast rush had cleared, and she told me about growing up in Chiang Rai, and I told her about Charlotte in a way that made Charlotte sound both very far away and very unimportant. That was the conversation that started it. I won't pretend the age gap wasn't part of the appeal on some level. I was 54, she was 34, and in Charlotte, that gap would have felt absurd or suspicious or both. In Chiang Mai, it felt possible, normal in the context of that world. Other men in similar positions had similar relationships and seemed to regard them as unremarkable. That's not a defense. It's honest context for why nothing about it alarmed me in the moment. I also want to say this clearly, because I think it matters for anyone who's going to understand the next part of this story accurately. I don't believe Fawn was calculating from the beginning. I think that interpretation is too simple and too convenient. I think she liked me genuinely, in the way that people can like each other across a significant gap of culture and age and expectation, and I think she also existed inside a set of family obligations and financial pressures that I was too ignorant to understand and too comfortable to ask about. That's not her fault. That's the fault of a man who did extensive research on visa requirements and cost of living spreadsheets and almost none on what it actually means, practically and financially, to be in a relationship inside a Thai family structure as a Western man with a visible pension and a savings account. Harold, the Brit from the scouting trip meetup, mentioned around month 4 that he was thinking about going to Vietnam to compare things. Just to keep the options honest. I remember the exact phrase, and I remember dismissing it completely. Harold had been in Thailand 9 years. If he was thinking about leaving, I told myself, that was Harold's restlessness, not a signal about the destination. My situation was different. My situation was working. The first visa run came at the end of month 3, a quick border hop to Mae Sai and back, slightly annoying in the way that any bureaucratic errand is annoying but manageable. I met 3 other men at the checkpoint who had been doing the same run every 90 days, some of them for years. One had been doing it for 7 years, grinning about it. I grinned too. Neither of us was thinking clearly about what the grinning meant, about the particular defensive cheerfulness of people who have normalized something that would have struck their previous selves as absurd. Fawn moved in at month 7, at my suggestion, not hers. I want to be clear about that because the narrative in expat circles tends to assign the engineering of these arrangements to the Thai woman, and that was not the dynamic I experienced. I asked her. I wanted the company. I was lonelier than I'd admitted to myself, and having someone in the apartment changed the quality of my evenings in a way that was immediate and real, and deeply hard to walk away from once you'd experienced it. The financial shift started quietly, the way water finds its level. It began with dinners. I'll cover it, it's fair, she works long hours. Then her phone bill, then a birthday present for her mother in Chiang Rai. These additions totaled maybe $200 a month, and I noticed them approximately the way you notice the price of coffee going up by 20 cents. Vaguely, without urgency, without any corresponding adjustment to the plan. Fawn's mother became ill in September, a genuine infection requiring hospitalization, not fabricated. I had no reason then or now to doubt it. The bill came to about $1,200. Fawn was distressed in a way I found genuinely painful to watch, and I had the money, and the comparison to American healthcare costs made the amount feel almost trivial. In Charlotte, a hospitalization of that kind would have cost 10 or 15 times that figure. I wrote the transfer. I felt good about writing it, useful in a way my corporate career, for all its competence and compensation, had rarely made me feel. The motorbike came 2 months later. $1,800, bought so Fawn could stop borrowing her cousin's unreliable machine and have actual independence of movement. The cousin's business opportunity surfaced 3 months after that. A small investment, just $3,000, family money, informal, no paperwork needed, because asking for paperwork with your partner's family feels unkind when you're the one with the savings account. Each of these things had a reason. Each reason was true. Collectively, they added up to a pattern I was refusing to name. My monthly costs had climbed from $1,800 to $2,900 by month 18. My pension covered $2,200. I was drawing $700 a month from savings, which didn't feel urgent because I still had, at that point, roughly $162,000 in the account. The math still looked long. I was managing, I told myself. And managing is what you call it when you don't want to call it what it is. I opened my banking app on a Thursday morning in the second year, and I sat with the number for a long time. $143,000. Down from $180,000 in under 2 years. The number was precise in a way that vague monthly overspending never is, and seeing it in one place did something to my stomach that I hadn't expected. I built a proper spreadsheet that afternoon, the first real budget analysis I'd done since the initial planning phase in Charlotte. The numbers were not complicated. They were just honest, and honesty was what I'd been avoiding. Vietnam and Philippines content had been appearing in my YouTube feed for weeks, and I had been closing tabs faster than I opened them. Harold had left for Da Nang by then, gone about 4 months earlier. He sent a WhatsApp that came in on a Saturday morning. "Mate, it's cheaper, younger energy, less complicated. Think about it." I read it, started to type a reply, deleted the draft, and didn't respond for 3 days. When I did respond, I asked where he was staying. He sent a photo of his apartment, ocean view, modern, clean, and told me he was paying $390 a month. I told him that sounded great and then closed the conversation and didn't follow up. The bot had been moving against the dollar in the direction no retirement video ever mentions. When I arrived, I was getting around 33 baht to the dollar. By the end of my second year, closer to 30. 8% reduction in purchasing power on a fixed pension, compounding monthly across years, doesn't feel catastrophic in any single moment and adds up to something significant across the span of a retirement. Fawn mentioned the cafe in March of my second year. A space near Nimmenhemen Road, good foot traffic, a fitted kitchen already in place, reasonable rent. Western Thai fusion coffee, good concept, genuinely thought through. She needed $18,000. I asked the questions I should have asked 2 years earlier, about business structure, about ownership, about what would happen to my investment if things went wrong. These were reasonable questions. They were the questions any investor would ask. But in the living room of the apartment we shared, over dinner she had cooked, they landed differently than they would have in a conference room. Fawn cried, not performance, I believe that, but genuine distress at what felt to her like skepticism aimed at her personally rather than due diligence aimed at the investment. I backed down. I told her I would think about it. I was already going to do it, and I knew I was already going to do it, and I think she knew too. We both understood what "I'll think about it" meant in that room at that moment. I sat on the balcony that night after she was asleep and had the most dishonest conversation of my adult life with myself. I told myself it was a reasonable investment. I told myself I believed in her, which was true. I told myself that in American terms, $18,000 was nothing. A used car, a bathroom renovation. Every single statement was technically accurate, and collectively they added up to a lie. The lie was that I was making a business decision. I was making a relationship decision and calling it a business decision, because calling it a relationship decision would have required me to honestly examine what kind of relationship it was and what my actual expectations were, and why the idea of her crying was sufficient to override 2 years of accumulated financial warning signs. Before we continue, please subscribe to my channel so you won't miss any videos in the future. I invested $15,000 in the end, negotiated down from $18,000 in a conversation I felt briefly good about, because negotiating felt like rationality reasserting itself. The investment was structured under Phan's name because Thai law does not permit foreign nationals to own a majority stake in a Thai business. This is not obscure legal trivia. It is a well-documented structural reality of operating in Thailand, one I had read about in forums before I ever moved there. I had just never expected it to become my personal problem, which is the particular self-exemption that gets careful people into trouble. There's a quality of knowledge you hold at arm's length, the kind you understand intellectually but haven't incorporated into your behavior. I understood Thai business ownership law the way I understood the dangers of certain financial instruments, correctly, abstractly, and in a way that produced no change in what I actually did. The cafe opened in October of my 3rd year, and for 4 months it performed adequately. Not well by serious business metrics, the margins in small Thai hospitality are punishing, but there were customers, there was coffee being made and sold, and Phan was visibly happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. I allowed myself, during those 4 months, to feel vindicated. I also, during that same period, finally started reading seriously about Vietnam and the Philippines. Not videos, actual expat forums, detailed cost of living databases, threads from people running real monthly budgets in Da Nang and Cebu and Dumaguete. The research arrived like cold water. Da Nang Sea View condos, $350 to $400 a month. Cebu private hospital care, comparable quality to what I was accessing in Chiang Mai, at better prices. Dumaguete forum after forum, describing a quality of life that felt like what Chiang Mai had been in 2015. I ran the numbers on what the last 3 years would have looked like if I'd moved to Da Nang instead. The figure I kept arriving at was somewhere north of $50,000. $50,000 I would still have had in a parallel universe where I'd watched different YouTube videos in 2020. The cafe started struggling in month 5. A new, better-funded competitor opened 200 meters away. Phan's customer counts dropped by about 40% in 6 weeks. She needed $4,000 more to stabilize operations. I noticed the word stabilize landing in my stomach differently than it once would have. I wired the money. I was at $108,000 in savings, and the rate of descent was clearly accelerating. The health scare came in January. Chest pains, enough to frighten me into Bangkok Hospital for a full workup. Everything structurally fine. Stress, the doctor said. Stress and maybe too much drinking, which I appreciated for its honesty. The bill was $3,000 to $800. My Thai health insurance had a clause about outpatient cardiac-related diagnostic testing that I had not read carefully enough at the point of purchase, and the clause existed in the gap between what I thought I had and what the insurer was willing to cover. In Charlotte, I would have had HR to read the fine print. In Chiang Mai, I was my own HR department, and I was not, it turned out, giving myself adequate attention. I had stopped posting in the expat forums around month 30. Not a decision, just an absence that accumulated. The forum ran on a particular register of optimism, look what I've found, look how well this works energy, and I no longer had access to it. I felt ashamed of that for a while, and then I felt tired instead of ashamed, which was progress of a kind. Harold had been sending occasional WhatsApps from Da Nang for months, and I had been responding with minimum viable replies. He sent a longer message in April saying he was coming back through Chiang Mai to collect his last few boxes and asking if I wanted dinner. I said yes. We sat across from each other at a restaurant near the moat, and I found myself looking at him with an objectivity I hadn't expected. He looked, genuinely, and not for effect, younger than he had when I'd met him at that first meetup almost 4 years earlier. The particular looseness around the eyes and jaw that people have when they're not carrying something heavy. Harold had it. I could feel by contrast the weight I was carrying without being able to set it down. He didn't push. He talked about Da Nang with the even-handed specificity of someone who has passed the honeymoon period and has actually stress-tested his conclusions. Monthly total spend, around $1,400. Building with a gym, $390 a month, 40 meters from the beach. Growing English-speaking expat community, functional but not calcified. He'd been researching the Philippines seriously, specifically Dumaguete and the SRRV visa structure. $10,000 refundable deposit, permanent residency status, full household goods import rights. He walked me through it with the patience of someone who has already made his decision and is not trying to convince you of anything, which is paradoxically the most convincing way to present information. I flew to Da Nang the following week alone, telling Fan it was to see Harold before he finished moving out, which was true in the way that truths can be technically complete and morally incomplete simultaneously. I didn't tell her I was pricing apartments. I didn't tell her I was looking at a life that no longer included Thailand. The city hit me differently than it had in 2021. Da Nang in 2021 had been a city in the process of becoming something. Da Nang in 2024 was that something. The Pham Van Dong beachfront road was lined with modern condos and international restaurants and cafes with good coffee and fast Wi-Fi and a low, easy energy that Chiang Mai had once had and had since lost to its own success. I walked into 4 different buildings and looked at apartments, and in every one, the combination of ocean view, modern fixtures, and reasonable pricing produced an emotion I can only describe as grief. Not regret exactly. More like the specific sadness of seeing what your life could have been if the choices had gone slightly differently at 2 or 3 key moments. I sat on Harold's balcony, $390 a month, South China Sea in the near distance, and ran the math out loud, with him across the table as a witness. Moving to Da Nang immediately would drop my monthly burn rate by roughly $900. Over 10 years, at no investment return, that differential was $108,000. Over 15 years, it was $162,000. These numbers didn't include what I'd already lost. They were just the cost of staying for whatever remained. I flew back to Chiang Mai. I sat in my apartment and looked at the space. The furniture Fawn had chosen, the small calendar on the wall with her handwriting marking family events, the kitchen that smelled like her cooking. And I understood with a sudden and complete clarity that I had built something real, and that it was also something I could not sustain, and that both of those things were equally true. And I was going to have to hold them both simultaneously while I did what needed to be done. The conversation with Fawn was the hardest thing I have done in my adult life. I've been through a divorce, the deaths of both my parents 18 months apart, enough corporate restructurings to have delivered the "your position has been eliminated" speech more times than I can count. None of those compare to sitting across from someone who has built her understanding of her future around your presence and telling her that understanding is no longer accurate. I framed it as thinking about Vietnam, which was cowardly, but I needed to see the shape of her reaction before I could understand what I was dealing with. The shape of her reaction was immediate and comprehensive. Her mother was called. Her mother called a cousin. The cousin arrived at my apartment the following evening with a calm, measured manner I recognized, belatedly, as the manner of someone who has navigated this territory before. The cafe represented my financial commitment to Fawn's future, I was informed. My departure would require some accounting. The figure cited was $8,000. A settlement. I'd consulted a Thai lawyer the week before, $200 for an hour of clear-eyed professional advice that was worth more than anything else I paid for in Thailand. And the lawyer was unambiguous. I had no documented interest in the business, no formal agreements, no legal exposure either way. I owed nothing under Thai law. Practically, the alternative to paying was an extended confrontation in a country where the legal process moves slowly, and my Thai was not good enough to navigate anything confidently, And I was 57 years old, and I was tired, and the cost of not paying was higher than $8,000 in every currency except the one denominated in dollars. I paid $8,000. Not because I had to, because I had spent 4 years building circumstances in which it was the rational choice. I don't regret the payment. I regret the 4 years. My landlord retained my $3,200 deposit under a restoration clause in the lease that I had never had properly translated. My lawyer reviewed it afterward and said it was probably unenforceable, but pursuing it would take months. I let it go. I sold my furniture for roughly 20% of what I had paid for it. The expat second-hand market in Chiang Mai floods constantly with the possessions of departing men, and buyers have no urgency. I canceled my visa extension and, due to a timing error that was entirely my own, overstayed by 4 days and paid the fine at the airport standing in a short line with other administrative failures, which was humiliating in a low-grade way that I think was appropriate. I left Thailand on a Thursday in what would have been my 41st month there. I had $87,000. I had arrived with $180,000. I did not cry at the airport. I was too tired for crying. I sat at the gate with my carry-on bag. I had shipped nothing. There was nothing worth the cost of shipping. And I looked at my phone and did the final calculation one more time. And then I put the phone away and boarded. Da Nang received me the way a city receives someone who is no longer a tourist and not yet a resident. Neutrally, practically, without ceremony. I found a studio apartment with a partial sea view for $380 a month in the first week. Not Harold's building, a different one, slightly smaller, which was fine because I had finally and completely internalized that smaller and cheaper was the direction I needed to move in. I bought a used bicycle. I found the local market 3 blocks away and started buying vegetables and cooking most evenings, something I had never done in Chiang Mai, because Chiang Mai makes cooking at home feel economically irrational when a full meal costs $3 outside your door. The cooking turned out to be useful not just for the cost savings, but for the structure it put into my days, which I had been underestimating the value of for a long time. My monthly burn in Da Nang settled at $1,650. Rent, food, utilities, health insurance, transport, occasional entertainment, $1,650 total against a $2,200 pension. Net positive for the first time since approximately month 2 in Thailand. I transferred $550 to savings at the end of my first full month and sat looking at the confirmation message for longer than was probably normal. It felt like proof of something I had stopped believing was real. I visited the Philippines 6 months after arriving in Da Nang, 2 weeks in Dumaguete, which a forum member had accurately described as what Chiang Mai was in 2015. A small city on the Negros Oriental coast, university town energy, English everywhere, and used naturally rather than as a performance for tourists. A seafront boulevard lined with restaurants and small hotels, cheap food, cheap housing, a functional but unhurried pace that felt genuinely restorative rather than performed. I priced a 1-bedroom apartment near the boulevard at $280 a month. The SRRV research confirmed what Harold had outlined: $10,000 refundable deposit, permanent residency, household import rights. St. Paul Hospital in Dumaguete had been expanding its international patient services steadily, English-speaking doctors throughout, reasonable pricing, with Cebu accessible in an hour for anything requiring specialist intervention. I met expats in both cities who had left Thailand in the same window I had. The broad 2022 to 2025 wave that the forums had started calling the Thailand correction. Different stories, different details. Some had simpler situations than mine, pure cost math without relationship complications, just the spreadsheet becoming impossible to rationalize. But almost every one of them, when I asked why Vietnam, why Philippines, why now, said some version of the same thing. I should have come here first. Not with bitterness, just accurately. The drinking slowed down in Da Nang without my deciding to slow it down. There was simply less occasion for it, and the occasions I did drink felt like choices I was making rather than defaults I was falling into. I started swimming in the mornings at a pool near my building. 20 laps, 40 minutes. the particular clarity that physical exertion in water produces. I started reading books again, real books, not just screens. I called my daughter Amber on a Sunday in November, and we talked for 90 minutes, actually talked, about her work and her apartment in Denver and what she was thinking about, and she asked about mine. And I told her, honestly, where I was and how I'd gotten there, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Dad, you sound different." I asked her how. She said, "You sound like you're somewhere instead of somewhere else." That sentence took me a while to understand, and when I understood it, I thought about it for days. I'm 58 now. My savings stand at $94,000, up from the $87,000 I landed with because I picked up a small remote consulting project helping a U.S. logistics firm evaluate Southeast Asian distribution partnerships. 4 or 5 hours a week, $1,400 a month, work that uses the experience I spent 20 years accumulating and had been trying to leave behind. It turns out the leaving behind was the problem, not the experience itself. The experience is fine. The experience is actually mine. It was only the corporate container it came in that was wrong. Now I want to tell you what I know. Not as a listicle, as the earned conclusions of a man who spent 4 years and $86,000 arriving at them, and who would like you to arrive at them for free. The first thing is about cost of living, and it is the most basic and the most ignored. Thailand is not the country the retirement videos were made about. The videos that convinced me were made in 2018 and 2019, and they documented a real reality. $3 meals, $400 apartments, genuine daily abundance on a modest pension. That reality still exists in specific pockets of Thailand in specific contexts, but the broad strokes have shifted. Chiang Mai rents are up 30 to 40% since I arrived in 2021. The bots movement has compounded that shift for dollar earners. The cost of living that Thailand's reputation is built on is approximately 5 years out of date, and the cost of living that Vietnam and the Philippines are currently offering is approximately what Thailand offered in 2021. If you are doing your retirement cost research in 2026, you are comparing the wrong numbers if Thailand is still the headline. The second thing is about legal structure, and it should be in the first paragraph of every Thailand retirement guide. And it is not. You cannot own land in Thailand as a foreign national. You cannot own a majority of a Thai business. Your lease protections are limited in ways that become visible only when a dispute arises and you are on the wrong side of it. I knew all of this abstractly, and it cost me anyway. Because abstract knowledge that you haven't built into your behavior is not the same as protection. The Philippines' SRRV program is not just a visa. It is a legal framework that changes your actual position in the country in ways that matter. The difference between those two situations is material, and I learned it the expensive way. The third thing is about relationships, and I want to be careful here because the subject gets discussed in expat circles either with contemptuous cynicism or with naive romanticism, and neither is accurate or useful. The financial dynamics of relationships between Western retirees and Thai women are real. They are shaped by structural economic inequality that exists independent of anyone's intentions or character, and they do not require villains to produce financial damage. What they require is a foreign man who does not understand the system he's operating inside. I did not understand it. I understood the parts I found comfortable, and I avoided the parts that made me uncomfortable. The avoidance was entirely my responsibility, and it cost me in proportion to its completeness. The fourth thing is about healthcare, and Vietnam specifically. Da Nang's international hospital infrastructure in 2024 is genuinely comparable to what I was using in Chiang Mai in my first 2 years. The gap that Thailand used to hold, the world-class private hospitals advantage, has narrowed significantly and in some comparisons closed entirely. Vinmec and family medical practice in Vietnam's major cities are not a compromise. Cebu and Mandaluyong in the Philippines are not a compromise. The assumption that Thailand's medical infrastructure justifies a significant ongoing cost premium is not as defensible as it was 5 years ago. Do the updated research. The updated research changed my position. The fifth thing is about English, and it is more consequential than it sounds in a YouTube thumbnail. In Thailand, I conducted the business of my daily life through a mixture of gesture, partial Thai, and the professional patience of Thai service workers. What that meant practically was that I never fully understood any official document I signed. Not my lease, not my health insurance policy, not the informal financial arrangements that accumulated around my relationship with Fawn. In the Philippines, I signed documents I actually read. I understood my landlord, and he understood me without either of us working at it. The psychological weight that disappears when you can actually understand the country you're living in. I had not accounted for that weight until it was absent. Its absence was significant. The sixth thing is about visa systems, and it is something that Thailand favorable content routinely minimizes. Thailand's retirement visa requirements have become more demanding since the early 2020s. The financial threshold requirements, the annual renewal cycle, the 90-day reporting obligations, the occasional border runs for those using tourist visa stacking strategies. These are manageable if you have the patience and the organization, but they are a real ongoing cost in attention and stress and intermittent money that accumulates across a retirement of 10 or 15 years. Vietnam's long-stay visa options have become more accessible for most Western nationalities. The Philippines' SRRV's $10,000 deposit is a one-time cost that eliminates the renewal cycle entirely and delivers permanent residency. I know which system I prefer now that I have experienced the difference from both sides. The seventh thing is about community gravity, and it is the one I find hardest to put into words because it operates on you in ways you don't recognize until you're outside its field. The established expat scene in Thailand, particularly in Chiang Mai, but in Bangkok and the beach towns too, creates a gravitational reality in which Thailand is the correct answer, in which the visible struggles are reframed as character building, in which leaving reads as failure and staying reads as commitment. The bars and the forums and the genuine friendships are all real, and I valued them. They also kept me in Thailand for at least 18 months longer than any clear-eyed financial analysis would have. Community is not a reason to bleed. That is the most expensive sentence I ever learned, and I offer it to you at no charge. Here is what I want to leave you with, directly. If you are sitting somewhere right now doing the research, watching the videos, running the numbers, feeling the pull of something that looks like a solution to a problem you can't fully name, the pull is real. The problem is real, and the solution exists. But the solution has different coordinates in 2026 than it had in 2019, and the content ecosystem is not caught up with the shift. Thailand is not a trap. It is a country with genuine advantages and genuine structural costs, and the balance of that equation has moved. Compare the current numbers, not the archived ones. Take a scouting trip that includes Da Nang and Dumaguete alongside Chiang Mai, and take it with the same rigor you would apply to a financial decision of this magnitude, which is what it is. Look at what $1,600 a month actually purchases in each city today, not in historical forum posts, but in current listings and current testimony from people currently living there. The mathematics of your retirement are not sentimental. They will not adjust themselves to match your preferences, but they will reward you if you're willing to look at them honestly and early before the costs of looking have compounded. I am $86,000 poorer than my 2021 plan projected I would be at this point. Some of that gap was unavoidable. No plan survives contact with a real life entirely intact, but most of it was structural, predictable, and priced into the Thailand retirement experience by factors that were documented and available, and that I chose not to weight correctly because I was in love with a destination before I understood it. That is the mistake I don't want you to make. It isn't about Thailand specifically. It's about moving romantic before you move smart. I swim in the morning, I eat well. My savings are moving in the right direction for the first time in years. I called Amber last Sunday and she laughed at something I said. Genuinely laughed, not the performed laugh of someone managing a difficult conversation. And I laughed too, in a way I hadn't managed in a while. Da Nang is not paradise. It is a good, affordable, functional city where I can live well on what I have and rebuild carefully toward something I can sustain across the years I have left. After 4 years of learning what enough means, I can tell you with confidence, it is enough. It is more than enough. It just took me a very long time and a significant amount of money to find out where enough was located. Creating those videos is often stressful next to a full-time job. So if you enjoy watching my videos, then please support me by subscribing to my channel. It just shows the algorithm that you like these kinds of videos. See you in the next video.